Hi modelers. In this video I go over some more of the details I added to the bow area, which includes working on the center anchor assembly and another boo-boo I made. And this is part 21 of my Trumpeter 1 to 200 scale Titanic build series. Now, to finish up the anchor chain handling equipment assembly, I added the steam pipes and the valves running the windlass. Now, the research shows that these pipes were painted green, but so far I left the pipes unpainted. I kind of like the brass look. Then next I added the bollards and the capstans to the bow and the forward well deck. And I'm going to wait to add the fairleads since they slightly hang over the bow and sit on the hull wall. So I'm going to have to wait until I glue the bow deck to the hull before I can apply the fairleads. Okay, now it's time to work on the center anchor. Now the Pontos kit has some fine brass details that one can add to the center anchor that comes in the Trumpeter kit. And the instructions for this process are found on page 9 of the Pontos instruction booklet. So here you can see all of the little fine brass parts that you can add to the Pontos anchor to give it a little more details, and then this here is the end result of what it looks like. So basically you have, these little fine parts right here, and then you got 3 support brackets, and then you got this ring bracket here which is used to lift the anchor in place by the anchor crane. And first I'm going to focus on these little support brackets here. There's 3 of them. So they're made of 2 parts. There's a flat part, and then there's kind of like a U part. So the first thing I did was I took the flat part of the support brackets and glued them to the side of the anchor that will be facing up. So they were just glued flush down onto the part of the anchor that they needed to go to. Once that dried, then I turned the anchor over, and since these flat pieces have little holes in them in which these U brackets kind of fit right into, when I turn them over I just put a little glue on those holes, and then those brackets just fit right into those and stayed put. And now I had a completed support bracket that you see over here, here, and here, with these brackets actually being connected or glued to the anchor via the flat strap part here on the top of the bracket, on the top of the anchor only. Now this does create a slight problem at this end of the anchor. Let me zoom out here a little bit. And you'll notice here on the grills that sit on the anchor well, the front one here, the anchor is going to have to go underneath it a little bit. Well, the problem is, here's a little mock-up I did of the little bracket, the strap bracket, and say this is the end of the anchor that would go underneath that center grill. Now, with the bracket being glued in such a way that the flat piece is glued up against the top side of the anchor, and now I got this space here and the anchor sits high. Because of that, it kind of interferes, or is a real tight fit underneath this center grill section here. So what I had to do is I just broke it loose and pushed it down, and then I glued the bottom portion here of this bracket to the bottom part of the anchor that faces down, and now I have a little more clearance. So I went from the anchor sitting up here to sitting down here. So that's just something to be mindful when you're using these Pontos parts, so that things fit a little bit better without a lot of interference. Alright, the next part was to install the anchor well grills. Now the Pontos kit has these grills having little tiny tabs on the sides here. And there's 3 on the outside and then 1 here on the inside. Now the instructions tell you to bend these 90 degrees. So they'll be bent 90 degrees down, and apparently if you look at the finished product here, these grills, they sit on the wall here of the well, anchor well, and they sit on these tabs. Now the problem I see with this is that you only have these little small tabs to glue these grills to the wall here that they sit on. And to me, that's not going to be much of a surface to glue them to, and they may easily break off. So what I did was I broke those tabs off, and instead of sitting these grills onto those tabs and then gluing that tab portion to the wall of the well deck, or the anchor well here, I now could glue the whole grill, or at least half the grill piece will be glued to this wall, because it's a pretty thick wall. And instead of the grill sitting a little higher than the wood decal here, now it sits right flush with it, right in line, and it's all on one surface plane here. So it's just something to keep in mind when you do these grills, that I just found that it's better to glue the grill itself without the tabs to the side of the wall here. And on YouTube you can see some of these big models of the Titanic that were done. There's a nice 1:72 scale model done on there, and they have a nice diagram or a picture of this section here, and it just looks like the grills sit right along as a continuous surface from the wood decking here, and then a continuous surface straight across. So there's no step up onto the grill or anything like that. So without those tabs, now these grills sit nice and flush and right in line with the wood decals here. So again, that's something that I did with these Pontos grills for my Titanic. And then here you can see the finished result with the grills in place. You can see it's just a nice continuous surface from the wood then onto the grills, and these grills are nice and secure to the top portion of the wall of the anchor well area. So they're not attached in a flimsy way. They're pretty well secured by doing this method and breaking those tabs off. Before I move on to the next part, I wanted to just cover one more thing about the grills. Now the front grill here sits a little bit higher than the side grills, and this front grill also had some tabs on it, but I broke those off because, again, if one would just sit the front grill on those tabs, it's just a very flimsy foundation. So I broke them off, and to create a more solid foundation for this front grill to sit on, I took a very thin piece of plastic that just raises this front grill up just enough that it will sit on top of the side grills and have like a little bit of a step here. So I glued that piece of plastic after I shaped it into the shape of a triangle to the bow deck, and then I glued the front grill section here to that clear piece of plastic, and now I have a nice solid foundation that this front grill section is glued to, and that's not going to go anywhere. So I forgot to mention about that little raising of the front grill piece there, but that's how I did that with this model. Alright, let's move on to the next part. Now, there's a detail that I found is missing that could be added to the grills in the anchor well. Now, I mentioned before on YouTube there is this video series. It's about 6 parts on how this modeler put together a 1:72 scale Titanic model. And when you look at the pictures that he shows of his well deck area, you're going to notice that there are 3 posts that are under the inner side of the side grills that support the side grill here. So there's one here, there's one about in the middle here, and then there's another one about here. And that's what I did on mine. If you look at kind of like the finished product here, you can see the little support posts that I put on mine. And let me show you how I did that. Now, what I used to make these little posts was that I took small pieces of wire strands from 16 gauge auto wire, and from there I cut them to various lengths that I needed. And if you look at the picture, the first thing that I did was I drilled 0.6 millimeter holes to accommodate these pieces of wire into the well deck. And then, to keep the wires from falling through the holes, I put a piece of masking tape on the underneath of the anchor well to block the hole. So now I could push the wires through the hole, and then they would run into the tape, and then I would kind of pierce the tape a little bit, and then from there I would gauge at how high I needed those posts to be, and I got them at the right height. And then, since they were pierced into this masking tape, that held them in place, so that now I could glue them on the top side in the anchor well area and glue them in place. And that's how I got those support posts to be at the right height. And then after I removed the masking tape from underneath, then I just put some more glue underneath to add some more support for these posts so that they wouldn't move at all. So that's how I made these support posts and how I got them to the correct height. And then I just painted everything black, and once I put the grills on those posts, and I just put a little super glue there and I glued them in place. So everything now is glued in place and sitting pretty secure. And you can see again from the finished product here, the support posts, they're not perfectly straight, but I got them as straight as I could, and they look pretty good, and they look like they're actually supporting the grills on the side there. Okay, here is the finished product with the anchor in the anchor well. You can see I have nice clearance underneath the front part of the grill here by repositioning the little support bracket here. I have no problems with sliding that portion of the anchor underneath the front anchor grill area. And I'm sure everybody's wondering, why is there some paint missing here? Well, if you remember in one of the pictures, that the anchor ring bracket, that's this thing here. I had it sitting up here. So this was another mistake. So I should have had it down near the bottom like it is right now. So I had to reposition that and put it down there. Now this ring was a little trouble to make. It's made of two parts from the Pontos kit. It's G18 and G19. Now when I was attempting to put this ring together, I dropped the G18 on the floor. And since I was working on carpet, this became a treasure hunt. I could not find it. So here's a tip on how to find small brass parts on carpet. Use one of those lint rolls that one can use to clean up hair or dirt on clothes, and roll it across the carpet. Now, on this lint roll, can you see the missing part on the roll? Here's a closer look. Now, even with this method, it took a couple sheets and time to finally find it. Well, once I found it, I taped it to the table and attached the ring to it, which is part G19. And then I bent this ring bracket into shape around the anchor shaft, and then I glued it in place without thinking about where the it was on the anchor, where it should go. So that's how it ended up, up here at the top part of the anchor. And so when I kind of broke it loose, it took some paint with it and it went down here. So I'll have to patch that up there and touch it up. But that's, I said I was going to talk about that ring bracket, and that's the little mishap that I had with making that. Now next, I added the 4 Wildcat valves that you see here. There's 4 of them. And this is where I made my mistake. Now, also a thing to note is that the Pontos kit moves the position of these valves. So I think on the model these valves sit a little bit forward and the Pontos kit has them sitting back. So you're going to have to drill some new holes to put the shafts here into and secure them. And I think again they were kind of like a 0.6 millimeter hole. I don't remember. But the problem that I had was that the pictures showed that with the Wildcat in place, I actually had the wrong shafts. And the shafts happen to be brass part number 6. And these are supposed to be used for the telegraph pedestals on the bridge. And if you look at the picture, it shows the shafts that I used by mistake compared to actually the longer shafts that I should have used. And I think they're brass part number 4 in the Pontos kit. Now, I only realized this error because when I put the little wheels on top of these shafts, they were not fitting right. So I figured out, okay, I used the wrong shafts, and so I had to redo the shafts, and then now the picture shows the correct shafts in place, and now when I put the wheels on, they fit on much better. And of course the end result is these 4 Wildcat valves that you see here. And then this picture here, I show the final result of what I had worked. Now I also did paint the side walls here of the #1 hatch, the kind of the rust red type of paint, and I also put the little support brackets here as well. But you can see I have the capstans in place, the bollards in place. You know, here are the steam shafts that I didn't paint. Now, you know, I might paint them green yet, I'm not sure. The valve system back here too, the bases that I have black, they should also be painted green according to some of the research that I've seen. So I'll probably do that. But I also got some of there's a telephone box here, and then a telephone box up front here. And I actually have this telephone box backwards. It actually should be facing toward the rear, and I have it facing open toward the front. Now I have the front one correct, but that's just something to be mindful if you do put this together. And also, since I have this piece of wood decal here slightly off, the hole for the crane for the center anchor doesn't quite match up right, so I had to re-drill that, and you know, that wasn't too bad, but that's all taken care of. So that's what I have done so far with the bow. In the next video, I'm going to go over how I lit the sea deck underneath here, and some of the electricals for the bow. So until that time, have a great day.